Hello everyone, welcome back to the greenhouse. I am Kate with Wallace's Garden Center, and today we are going to be talking about planting berries in the home garden. We're going to talk blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries, all three of which can grow here in our Midwestern climate and are easy for you to grow at home if you know what you're doing. So stay tuned, listen to our advice, and stop into the nursery, and hopefully we can help you get going on your berry gardening. The first plant we're going to talk about today is blueberries. We go through a lot of blueberries in our house. I love them. They're a great snack, frozen, fresh eating. We love to bake with them. We love to make blueberry pancakes, and they're so good for you. So they're just kind of the perfect all-around snack in our family. Blueberry bushes have become really popular in the last few years for a couple of reasons. One, the fruit is awesome, and it's just a great thing to have around, but also for their ornamental value. Blueberries, when they bloom in the spring, they have beautiful little bell-like white flowers, and then when their foliage comes on, it's a really nice, clean, nice shiny green foliage that makes a really nice accent shrub in your landscape. And then when we get into the fall season, they actually have really nice fall color. So we're getting 3 seasons of interest and something that we can eat all out of 1 or 2 plants in the garden. If you haven't thought about growing blueberries before, definitely start thinking about it now. The one thing about growing blueberries that you may or may not know is that they have to have an acid soil. And that is something that we don't have typically here in this area. Our soils tend to run at a neutral to high alkaline pH, so between 7 and 8 is where we are. Blueberries like to grow at between 4 and 5. So we definitely have to do stuff to our soil to get the soil back to where blueberries are going to want to live, thrive, and produce fruit for us. The way to do that here is a couple different ways. Number one is if you have heavy clay, you want to till it up, add compost, add organic matter, and get it so that it's nice and easily worked. If it's real heavy in clay, you can have root rot and just have your blueberries kind of never take off. To lower the pH, we want to use a product called soil acidifier. And what this is elemental sulfur or pelletized sulfur you may read about if you're doing any research. So this is a granular product that you're going to mix into the soil before you plant, and then in subsequent years you're going to continue to top dress the soil around your blueberries with this product. And it is not a fertilizer. What it does is simply lower the pH of the soil, so it can bring your pH from that 7 or high 6s down into the 5s and hopefully 4s, which is where we want to be to grow blueberries. If you're not sure where your pH is at currently, you can get a pH tester. This is a really simple one. It's not very expensive, and you can use that to test the pH of your soil throughout your garden. And this is a good thing to have as well for tomatoes or in your vegetable garden if something's not doing well. Sometimes if our pH is too low, our plants can have a hard time taking up fertilizer or nutrients that they need. So a pH meter is a good thing to have around if you're growing multiple crops and want to see kind of the story behind what's going on in your dirt. Once you have the soil acidifier, that's usually not quite enough to bring our soil pH down to where we want it to be so that we can plant blueberry plants. So we also sell these awesome planting mixes. This is from Coast of Maine, so it's all organic, and this is their acid-loving plant mix. So this is a organic soil amendment compost that is going to also help lower the pH of the soil. So we want to make sure that we mix that in really good. You can also add sphagnum peat to your soil mix to make really a nice, fertile, well-draining acid soil for blueberries. That is the key to success with blueberries. If you plant them without doing any soil prep, you're probably going to struggle to get fruit and get them established. So make sure that you're doing this process first before you even start picking out plants. So once you have your soil prepped, you've decided where you're going to put them, it's time to think about the plants themselves. There are lots of different varieties out there. They all have kind of really good characteristics about them. The key when you're purchasing is that you want to have 2 different types. Blueberries will fruit with just one variety. If you have 2 or even 3 is better. Different types, you get cross-pollination, you'll get better yield, higher yield, and better tasting fruit when you have the pollen mixing across the blueberry varieties. And there are some that are really big that get 6 to 8 feet tall. You can also get half-high blueberries that are only about 3 to 4 feet. And there are also some real dwarf small types that are only about 2 feet. So you can find ones that fit into your garden space. We like to do more of the kind of the half-high ones that are about 3 to 4 to 5 feet tall. Makes them easier to pick and just work better in our kind of suburban landscapes that we have. So once you've picked out your plants, you want to make sure they look nice and healthy. These are blooming right now. Once they pass bloom, then they start to put out all their leaves. So as you look at them maybe later in the year at the garden center, you'll see less flowers and more foliage as they start to fruit. Like many fruits and vegetables that we grow in our gardens here in the Midwest, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, they all prefer full sun. So a good 6 hours or more of sunlight. Blueberries are one that are a little bit shade tolerant. So if you do have a space where you're not sure if it's quite enough sun, I would choose to put your blueberries there rather than your raspberries or blackberries. Once you're ready to plant, it is important to dig your hole nice and wide. Again, we've kind of made that really nice soil amended area where we have the acid mix in there, we have the peat mixed in, and we're going to dig that hole fairly shallow, nice and wide, usually about twice as wide as the container that the plant is in. And then we're going to dig it equally as deep. So when we plant our blueberry bush, we want it to be planted so that the depth that the plant is planted at right now is the same depth that it's planted on when we move it from the container into the ground. That's really important. If you plant it too deep, you can have problems with root rot and the plant just not establishing. If you plant it too high, that soil can wash away and you can have roots exposed, which causes problems with winter hardiness. So getting it planted at the same depth is important. I recommend after you get it planted, top dressing with a little bit more of the soil acidifier. And by top dress, that just means spreading the soil acidifier over the top of the soil that is around the plant. And then I also recommend mulching. And this is going to help keep weeds down. It's also going to help retain moisture when it's hot and dry. It's also going to help keep the temperature of the soil at a more consistent temperature instead of going up when it's really hot and down when it's really cold. It's just going to add an insulating layer. For mulch around blueberries, I recommend our pine bark mulch because that pine bark is going to also help lower pH. It's going to add some acidity to the soil. So once you get them planted, we're going to put down the soil acidifier, mulch them in with pine bark mulch, and then they are ready to go for the season. You will get blueberries the first year, not the full amount that you should expect in years to come. Blueberries are very long-lived, and you don't really have to do a lot of pruning on them. You can do some shaping, but for the first 5 to 6 years, there's not a lot that you have to do besides keeping them watered and keeping that pH low and maintaining that every spring and every fall. So now that you have your blueberries planted in the ground and they're all mulched in and we're watering, they like to have about an inch of water per week, whether that's through rain or through you providing supplemental water. We need to talk about pests. We don't have a lot of insect pests or diseases that affect blueberries. If we've planted them correctly, we shouldn't have any issues with root diseases, and there's not a lot of insect pests. What we do need to worry about most is birds. Just like we love the blueberry fruit that is on them, so do the birds, and they will come after it. So if you start to see where you've got birds kind of picking off your fruit before you get a chance, think about just purchasing some simple bird netting, at least to protect your crop as it develops and ripens on the plant. So you may have to think about that. Sometimes if you have dogs out in your yard a lot, or if you have a lot of kids and activity in your yard, the birds will kind of stay away from your plants, but sometimes you'll come out and find that the crop you were hoping to pick and have along with your dinner is been fed to someone else. Make sure that you keep that in mind as a pest that might get in your way. Other than that, blueberries are pretty simple. The biggest thing is to keep in mind that soil pH and plant them. Enjoy their beautiful flowers, their awesome fruit, and their wonderful fall color. If you want to grow other fruit in your garden, two great plants to consider are raspberries and blackberries. They are relatively similar in how you grow and produce each kind of fruit, so we're going to talk about them together. They both like really sunny locations, so the more sun the better, but you'll want to have at least 5 to 6 hours of sun for them to grow and produce. They will grow in a little bit of shade, but they won't produce as much fruit if you don't have them in full sun. Raspberries and blackberries, though they are not quite as acid loving as our blueberries are, where blueberries like to have a pH between 4 and 5, raspberries and blackberries like to have one that's about between 5.5 to 6.5. Again, our soils here run a little bit more alkaline than that, with a little bit higher pH. And so when we go to get ready to plant those in our sunny area, again, we're going to use the soil acidifier, which is elemental sulfur, and it's not a fertilizer. Again, this is just going to lower the pH down. If for some reason you would need to raise your pH, you've taken your pH meter and you found that your pH is actually very, very low. This can happen if we've once had pine trees growing in an area and they've come down, and that soil can be really, really low pH. If you ever have a low pH area you need to raise, then you would use lime, and lime is going to raise the pH of a soil. So for our raspberries and blackberries, we are pretty much going to always want to lower, and so we're going to use that soil acidifier. Just follow the instructions on the package as for how much to use. But just keep in mind that because of our water and our natural soils here, that pH is always going to be trying to creep back up again. So you'll want to apply the soil acidifier every spring and every fall so that we can keep that pH down where we want it to be for optimum plant growth. When you choose raspberry plants and blackberry plants, there's lots of different varieties. You can get summer bearing varieties of raspberry. You can also get fall bearing. Or ever bearing is another word for fall bearing. We tend to sell more of the fall bearing raspberries here in our area, which is why you always think of getting fresh raspberries from the store in the late summer months. That's when they are in season here. Raspberry bushes do have thorns on their stems, so when you're thinking about, oh, this will be a really fun project for me and my kids, keep in mind that they do have thorns on them. Some of the blackberries do, and then this is one called Chester that is actually a thornless blackberry. So if thorns are a concern for you with pets or small children, think about some of the thornless varieties. There is a raspberry that is mostly thornless called raspberry shortcake, and so that would be a variety to consider as well if you're looking for that. A lot of times if you order your fruit plants like this online, they'll come bare root, where you'll just get kind of a stick with roots on it. And that is how we buy them here, but we actually go ahead and plant them into pots with soil and get them rooted out for you. So you don't have to worry about, if you're reading online about pre-soaking the roots and pruning it down to 2 inches, we've already done all those steps for you here at Wallace's. So if you come and buy plants from us, they are ready to go into the ground. We talked about using the soil acidifier to lower the pH. Again, you're probably going to want to amend your soil. They like to have a nice, rich, well-draining soil. We can see root rot and root diseases if we don't have well-amended soil. So if you have heavy clay, make sure that you are thinking about an organic soil amendment. The one I like to use is the acid-loving plant mix from Coast of Maine. It's all organic, nice, really rich compost that's going to add nutrients to the soil, lower the pH, and just be a really nice mix. When you're mixing it in with the soil that you have in your area for planting, when you dig your holes, you want to mix this in with that backfill soil. So it'll be about a 50-50 mix of your native soil and the acid-loving compost mix. So once you have that ready and you're ready to plant, you want to make sure you read the tags for your variety and see how big that plant is going to get. Some of our raspberries can get as tall as 6, 7, 8 feet and 4 to 5 feet wide. So you want to make sure you give them room to grow. If raspberries and blackberries don't have enough space, they get crowded, they don't get good airflow, and then you can end up with some foliar spotting diseases, and you just don't get as much fruit when you don't have as good of light penetration either. Most raspberries, we're going to go ahead and recommend that you provide some sort of support for them. A trellis is a great way to do it. Some people will just kind of use a tomato cage or kind of two cattle panels put into a teepee shape. Each raspberry plant and blackberry plant is going to produce about 2 quarts of raspberries per plant once they get to their most productive time. The first year, you're going to have some fruit from these guys because they are already 2-year-old plants. So you will get some fruit out of raspberry plants bought at Wallace's this year, but you won't see your heaviest crops until the 2nd and 3rd and 4th seasons. Raspberries are fairly long-lived. They actually are a crown that is planted in the ground, and then they send up new canes every year. And so they actually fruit on the 2nd-year-old canes, so that's why a lot of times you don't get fruit in the first year. So, but they will continue to live for 10 to 20 years is usually how long you'll have a nice productive raspberry or blackberry plant. So once you have them planted, we again will recommend mulching them in with a nice light layer of pine bark mulch that's going to help lower pH, it's going to help suppress weeds and keep that temperature of the soil more constant. And then we just kind of got to wait for them to grow. They get very large, they grow very quickly. And the last thing we have to talk about is pest control. Just like we love raspberries, so do the birds. So if you live in an area where you notice a lot of songbirds around, definitely think about purchasing some form of protection for your raspberry plants. We have this bird netting. It's nice and lightweight. You don't really notice it, so it's not going to be something that's an eyesore out in the garden, but it is going to keep the birds from eating the raspberries before you can get them picked. To know when to pick them is really easy. When they first start to form, they're very green. Then they're kind of a pale red. Once they get to that nice red color that you see in the grocery store, go ahead, give them a slight tug, and if they come off easily, they're ready to go. If you have to really kind of pull hard to get them off, they're not quite ready yet, give them another day or two. Another pest that we have to talk about with blackberries and raspberries is Japanese beetles. They are just kind of a necessary evil in this area. We get Japanese beetles and they tend to go to our roses and our raspberries first. So a couple things you can do to protect your raspberry patch from Japanese beetles. Some people like to simply hang a Japanese beetle trap on the other side of their yard so that the beetles are attracted over there and away from the raspberries, kind of a diversion technique. If you don't want to do that and you want to spray, there are some sprays available that are organic, that are safe to use. This is one that we recommend called Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew, and you can spray this on your raspberry plants. It comes in a hose end, also a ready-to-use spray bottle, so you can go ahead, spray your Japanese beetles if they're on your raspberry plants with the Captain Jack's. It will take care of the beetles, and you can go ahead and harvest your raspberries later. As with any fruit produce that you get out of the garden, make sure that you're washing it if you've done any sprays at all. After that, it's just year after year. You do have to do some pruning. Raspberries are not quite like blueberries where they're simple and you don't need to prune for a while. Because there are so many different types of raspberries and blackberries and different pruning recommendations, we actually recommend that you either come talk to us and we can tell you how to prune the different types. Even between red raspberries and black raspberries, they have different pruning recommendations. So this is a book that we sell here that I love if you are a fruit grower, if you're doing apples, cherries, peaches, strawberries, any of the fruit crops in your backyard. This backyard fruit production has really, really great information. It's easy to understand. Lots of diagrams on how to prune, how to trellis. So that is a really great resource. You can also find some great information on our blog or on the Learning Hub on our website. So when it comes to pruning raspberries and blackberries, definitely do a little bit of research before you get in there with your pruners, because there's definitely a right way and a wrong way to do it. After the first year, once you've planted your new raspberry, blueberry, blackberry plants, you will want to add a little bit of fertilizer every year. So we are going to continue with the soil acidifier. That's going to continue to lower pH. But when you want to do a fertilizer, I like to use the berry tone from Espoma. The berry tone is a nice, slow release organic fertilizer that is just going to kind of add nutrients back into the soil and just be a really nice, even, easy, non-burning fertilizer for any of the fruit crops that you've just planted. Not a lot of material that you need to grow fruit in the backyard, but it's definitely something that's fun. It's a really great way to get your family involved and get the kids out helping you in the yard and working in the garden and learning where their food comes from. Thanks for joining me today here at the greenhouse. Come visit us at Wallace's for all your fruit planting needs, along with anything else you have as for questions in your home and garden.